Good evening. The Rancho Board of Education special board meeting for Monday, June 6, 2022 is now called to order. Kim, if all could please arise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Jessica Tyler will give us that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Kim, can you take a roll call for us?
Glad to do that. President Galbraith. Present. Vice President Morgan. Present. Secretary Scott. Board Member Tripp. Present. Board Member Tyler. Present. You have a quorum 4-0.
Hopefully Noreen Scott will be joining us soon. We'd like to welcome everyone out to our meeting tonight. It is the best when we have a nice full boardroom, and so we just welcome all of you who are here tonight, and we have a great accreditation report that we will all be receiving, and we're really excited about it. To get us started tonight, we're going to go ahead and approve our prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations. Are there any changes that need to take place on the prioritized agenda as it's been presented?
As Board Member Jeff Morgan, I make a motion to approve the prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations.
Board Member Jessica Tyler will second.
Okay, we have a motion by Jeff Morgan and a second by Jessica Tyler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Please make a note of Noreen Scott coming in. Okay, next we'll approve the consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? Or a motion?
Make a motion.
This is Board Member Noreen Scott. I move to accept the consent agenda.
Board Member Gary Tripp, I second it.
Okay. We have a motion by Noreen Scott and a second by Gary Tripp. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Okay, so with that, now we got through all of our business. So we will start off tonight with some comments by our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Visu Cleveland.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here this evening. We're really delighted to have you here in person. We know there's also a good number of folks who are listening remotely, and we're glad to have you as part of this meeting as well. Okay, we hope this evening that you're going to learn more about our strengths as well as the opportunities that we have for improvement within our district. And we have a long time been involved in improvement and trying to keep our focus on how we can be better than we are today. It is certainly in the history of our district, one of the strengths of the Rio Rancho Public School District has always been its community involvement and its commitment in the schools. And we really do appreciate all that you do to continue to support our staff and our students. We are in the process right now of developing a new strategic plan. We've had great involvement through the process from staff and from students, from parents, community members, and I see several people here this evening who are part of that process. And the strategic planning team, as it's working on its strategic planning effort, has been incorporating the findings of this accreditation visit as well as other important state requirements in their work. So the guiding question that I think is just really important for all of us is what facilitates and then what hinders the process of growth, change, and innovation in our district. And so we know that some things will help us move forward, some things keep us from moving forward. So through the process, we have been attempting to identify those areas of strength, but equally important, those areas that we definitely could continue to improve in. So I mentioned a couple of things, but I'd like to kind of reemphasize that. There are 3 sources that will greatly influence our future planning. The first is the report that you're going to hear this evening. It is a diagnostic report, and in that report, it rates all of the standards, and it shows how we're making progress on each of those standards. And you'll get a lot of information about that this evening. As I mentioned, we're also working on the strategic planning document that includes both internal and external feedback. And just as importantly, it aligns with the Communist standards and helps us set our future direction for the district. Our last strategic plan is about 6 years old. We delayed doing this because of the pandemic, but we're certainly now moving ahead very quickly in order to have that plan available in the fall. And then last, but also very important to us, is the Public Education Department's strategic plan and their Yasi Martinez action plan. And they are requiring all school districts to be in alignment with both of those documents. And we haven't really done a lot of work in aligning that, but in looking at it just kind of superficially, we think we're just fine. I think we certainly are in line with most every one of the components that are required in those two plans. And so the key is alignment, a crosswalk among the three, because we want our community, our staff, everyone to only see one plan, to only have just one thing to have to look at rather than trying to work with 3 different plans and 3 different documents. So, why is it so important? Why is accreditation so important to us? Certainly, one of the most important things is it gives us a really clear set of standards so that we know exactly what we're working towards. It is also an important tool for benchmarking against quality districts nationally and internationally. Certainly, we want to know how we're doing here in New Mexico as we look at our district and other districts in our state. But we also really want to know how are we doing in comparison to other quality districts in other places, not only across the country, but also internationally. And then we think that it's really important to have that extra set of eyes, an impartial new set of eyes that will provide independent analysis so that our business community, our general community, and our families know the strengths and opportunities for improvement in the district. So there are several benefits to accreditation, and it certainly helps us establish our context, to look back in our history. We have a very wonderful history. We've accomplished a lot over almost 28 years, and so we're proud of that. But also the environmental scan in terms of what is our current landscape, what do things look like now, what are the challenges that we're facing now, and what do we need to do to adjust and deal with those new challenges. It also, I think, encourages each of us to ask probably the most important question: how are we going to improve all aspects of our work to better serve students tomorrow than we are today? And it holds each of us accountable for that improvement and for having a growth mindset for the district. And I think we've always had that. I would be really honest and say that the last 2.5 years with COVID, really kind of put a dent in that. We kind of focused more and more on survival, how we were going to make it through, how we were going to just meet the emergency needs. We're now trying to shift back to a different kind of thinking in terms of, what do we need to do for the future, and how does that need to look different than what we are doing right now. And then the last comment I guess I would make on that is it really helps address that conflict that always exists between being excellent and doing the things that we know and we're comfortable with and we do a really good job with, but balancing that with trying something new and knowing that we can always get better. Know there's new things out there and then innovating things that are going on, and we always want to be looking, not because it's new, but if it's more effective, if it's better, if it produces better results. Always stay on that cutting edge. So we did something different this year. In the past, we have had schools accredited. In the early years of our school district, all of our schools were accredited in Rio Rancho. When the Great Recession hit, we were dealing like everyone else was. We were just reeling from some of the changes there. And so financially, we backed off on our elementary and middle schools. We continued to do our high schools. It was also the time of No Child Left Behind, and there was huge demands being put on school districts, on schools, on individual staff members. And so we kept our high schools accredited, but we did not have all of our schools accredited. And so we reevaluated that. We believe it does promote better articulation of our goals and our expectations across the whole district. We think it's a very powerful thing in terms of economic development. And I have heard that from many of our business people here. You know, it really helps when you're trying to bring businesses to your community, that you could say all of your schools are nationally and internationally accredited. And so we heard that, and we took that to heart. When we're out looking for people to come to our district, it also, I think, is just one of the many things that we include in terms of selling the district to people who might be considering working for us. And it certainly does pave the way for innovation and creativity. And it's really important that we are looking at our standards in maybe a little different way. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it's still pretty important that you have students that are in high school, that they graduate from an accredited high school. That still matters in most of the universities and colleges across the country. And we hope that it will also create an awareness among all of our community and stakeholders of the challenges. But, you know, we really like to share the good things. We love sharing the good things in our district. We have a lot to share, a lot to celebrate. But it's also really important the community understands our challenges. And we have been facing some major challenges the last several years. And so we want them to be aware of those needs as well. So we look to accrediting body and we look to Cognia. And I'm not going to go into great detail because our presenter will tell you more about Cognia. But it is very impressive in terms of its scope. And you can see the numbers there. We wanted a group that would be strong enough not only to evaluate our district fairly and thoroughly, but we also wanted to be able to join a network of other school districts who also were very committed to doing better for their students and families. So just what are the benefits we get out of this process? What do we receive? We get an independent assessment that is conducted by trained evaluators. And those evaluators come from within the state and also external to New Mexico. We get a diagnostic report with feedback on the progress that we're making and the performance, both progress, process, and outcomes related to the standards. And we get ongoing monitoring and support. Accreditation used to be once, you know, they showed up in every 10 years and you did a big event and then it was kind of over for another 10 years. And that's no longer the process, and Dr. Denmark will talk a little bit about that, but it provides an extensive network of schools and districts that we can work with, share ideas, learn from, and be part of that network. The other thing that we really liked about the process is that it looks at both process, how you do things, and then the outcomes. If you do really a good job with your process, outcomes usually take care of themselves, but you obviously need to look at both, and this effort looked at both of those. So we welcome this evening Vicki Denmark, who is Cognia's Chief Architect for the Innovation Lab. We were very lucky to get someone of her caliber out of Cognia, and it's been it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to get to know her and to work with her. She will share her observations about the visit, and she will present the findings of the diagnostic report. I really want to thank Dr. Denmark and the whole Cognia accreditation team for their hard work during the visit, but I also want to thank our accreditation team in the district for their efforts and commitments for over 2 years working through this process. And both the visiting team and our group worked under very challenging circumstances during the pandemic, and they already had a lot on their plate, but still stepped up to make this happen. We also have this evening Dr. Susanna Murphy. She is Cognia's Senior Director for the mountain area in the United States, but we're really glad to have her as well because she's a long-time resident of Rio Rancho, and her son is a Rio Rancho High School alumni. So we're delighted that she is here as well. And again, these are, I want to thank the accreditation team, the district-wide team, for their effort. I also want to very much express our appreciation for the principals and their leadership teams at the building level who also had to support this effort. One of the reasons we did district-wide was to take some of the load off of the individual school. It certainly didn't take all of it off. And so there was a tremendous amount of time and effort that our site level staff put into this effort, and we appreciate that. The principals who are here will be receiving their accreditation certificates this evening, and we certainly want to honor the work that they did as well. This is the district level team who directed the effort across the district for the last 2.5 years. Okay, I think that's it. All right. I'm now going to ask Carl Lockelman to come and make some comments, and also to formally introduce Dr. Denmark. So again, thank you all for being here.
President Galbraith, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. It is an excellent night tonight, isn't it, to have all of our principals and ministers out in the audience and community members. It really is an honor to introduce Dr. Denmark. She actually took time out of her busy schedule to travel from Atlanta, Georgia, which is, I think, approximately 1,400 miles away. And we've really, over the last few months, have really respected her input. Her team was tremendously insightful and gave us, had a lot of background and really helped us to get a good report. As a chief architect for the Innovation Lab, Dr. Vicki Denmark oversees the design and development of solutions and resources for educational institutions to improve organizationally and, most importantly, for students to succeed. She serves as a subject matter expert for products, content, and solutions, and identifies new opportunities that lead to innovative solutions for institutions. And we're an excellent district, always looking towards innovation. She has worked with K-12 schools around the world, and prior to joining Advanced Ed in 2010, Dr. Denmark served in leadership roles in large public school districts in Georgia. She began her 38-year career in education as a classroom teacher, and then as an assistant principal, area superintendent, and assistant superintendent. She also served as a full-time university professor, where she has taught master's and doctoral level courses to aspiring educational leaders. Dr. Denmark has co-authored a book, Mentoring First-Year Teachers, and several research-based journal articles, and served on national and statewide boards that focus on middle-level education, which is, by the way, a very important part of our program here. She holds a PhD in educational policy studies from Georgia State University. Welcome, Dr. Denmark.
Good evening. Good evening, Board Chair Galbraith, board members, Dr. Cleveland, your cabinet, the community members, and Dr. Murphy. It is my privilege to be here, and traveling 1,400 miles by an airplane is an easy thing to do, really, and no hiccups this time, so that was really nice. But thank you for bringing me here and making this presentation that I'm so very pleased on behalf of the accreditation team to present to the community of Rio Rancho Public Schools. Thank you. Before I begin, I want to say congratulations. This is a time to celebrate. Yes, we're going to hear information about successes of the district. You're also going to hear about the findings where the team really researched and believes that you can improve. But most importantly, this is a time to celebrate your success. And I want to say in the very beginning that your IEQ score, and we'll talk more about that later, is exceptionally high. The IEQ is the index of educational quality, and it's exceptionally high, especially for a first-time district to be accredited. So if I might ask everyone just to say yay or clap or something, because it is tremendous. So let's get down to business. a little bit about Cognia first. And you can see from the slide, this is what we believe, and we actually live it. We know schools because we're in schools. Now, for the past 2.5 years, we're going to be realistic. We have not been physically in schools. We've had to conduct our reviews remotely. But prior to that, we were face-to-face in schools. And for a district accreditation review, typically that is a 3-day on-site review. So with the Zoom capability that we had, and thank you so much to Carl's team and Carol for all the logistics that they handled, we conducted all the review parts through Zoom, and it worked seamlessly. But Cognia itself is a global nonprofit organization, and Dr. Cleveland gave a really good description of Cognia. But I want to also add to that we accredit 7 different institution types. So that ranges from independent schools, like she mentioned earlier, high schools, districts, corporations, ESAs, and several others. We won't get into those. We're only going to focus on the district part. But in saying that, we apply the same performance standards and protocol to all 7 different unique institution types. And I say that because with those standards, they're only revised just a little bit to meet very particular contexts. But in essence, they're the same for all institution types. Cognia always focuses on the learner. Even when you read the standard, you can see that it might say institution, but we're really meaning the institution must focus on the learner. In fact, our vision is this, and I'm going to read it to you: to impact and inspire education providers, which is what the district is, to advance and enable pathways of success for all learners. And when we write all learners, we mean each and every learner. Okay, next. So we're on to accreditation. Sorry. Okay. And what is it? And I don't want to duplicate what Dr. Cleveland so articulated, but it's a voluntary method. It actually started over 100 years ago for this purpose. And it was a joint effort between universities and colleges and high schools at that time to ensure that when a Carnegie unit was awarded, that it meant something. And so that was a pathway, if you will, for accreditation. We've not moved too far away from that, but yet we've moved years and years away from that. As Dr. Cleveland described, we're not a compliant type organization. Our standards and protocol are not about compliance, meaning it's either yes or no. It is really stemmed foundationally on continuous improvement. But again, accreditation is recognition, and it's a status that means a lot, and it has for over 100 years. Again, we apply accreditation at all levels, those 7 different institution types, for the purpose of making sure that all students have a pathway for success and all learners' needs are met. So what is our improvement journey? Cogni's improvement journey, again, is a journey. And I hate to say it to all those who were involved, it never ends. A journey is it just keeps on going. So 2 years ago, when we first started the work, and Suzanne has been part of this much longer than I have, accreditation was viewed as that event. It's like, whoo, I am so glad we have moved through that 5-year or 6-year part, and we don't have to worry about advanced ed Cognia for a while. That is no longer the case. It is continuous improvement, meaning whenever and whatever needs to be improved, it is reflected, data are real analyzed, and improvements are made. You're constantly in that motion of improving. We have standards, we have policies, we have assurances, and all of those requirements are part of our continuous improvement process. And we want to make sure that you as a district periodically engage in that type of analysis and review process. And you do get support from Cognia. And one of our requirements that we're really, really clear about is that you must, as a district, practice and embrace continuous improvement. And by the way, you do. Okay. So systems accreditation. Dr. Cleveland touched on this, but I want to really, really emphasize that's the underlying foundation for systems thinking. And when we think about systems thinking theory, we know a certain set of principles apply. In fact, there's 6. So for systems thinking, we look at the wholeness of the district. How do you operate as a whole? We also make sure that there's a hierarchy, there's a protocol within the district for making decisions. We also want to make sure that self-regulation occurs. There's an openness about the district. Communication is transparent. That you're easily to adapt to change, which you've certainly demonstrated the past couple of years. That there's stability and flexibility within the district. all those principles apply to systems theory, which again is part of our continuous improvement and systems accreditation model. But for systems accreditation, it simply means that the system, the district office itself, guarantees that all the schools meet the quality assurance standards, meaning they meet all the standards that the district meets and then some. And so that is the reason why you're accredited as a district. And again, going back to Dr. Cleveland's comment, it used to be the high schools, but now there is a system-wide process and accreditation. So again, congratulations on that. Next. So what is the meat, if you will, the substance of all this work? And they are what we call the performance standards and assurances. And they are, again, required by all the institution types. So a little bit about that. And our standards are, and I think it's really important that we look at this, they are based on research and effective best practices. And I can say that with great merit. I have led the past 2 development of the standards for Cognia, and it's always been a privilege to do that. It's actually over a year-long process just to develop the standard statements themselves. And we have a process in which we scan research, we look at data, we make sure that there's a lot of vetting. We go through criteria to make sure there are no emotionally charged words, that they're always easy to understand, free of jargon, and again, focused on the learner. And again, it's based on very rigorous research, and we have the data to show that. It's a powerful tool for driving improvement, and you can use them anytime. So please keep them close and handy as you make decisions, not only for the district, but for the schools themselves. And again, it's supposed and designed to improve instruction, designed to improve organizational effectiveness, and again, focus on the learner. Thank you. They're divided into 3 domains. Let me show you what those are. And they are beginning in no particular order, it's just the way we framed them. The leadership capacity domain, there are 11 standards of quality in that domain. The learning capacity domain with 12 standards, and the resource capacity domain with 8. And if you can add like I can, that's a total of 31 standards for the district. Let's go to the next requirement, and that is what we call the assurances. So I've talked a little bit about continuous improvement. This is the only part of our protocol that truly is compliance-based, meaning that each one of these bulleted items, the policies and procedures, security and crisis management plan, the financial transactions, all of those actually have more descriptors than I've listed here, but it means that the district must comply to each one of these bulleted items as well as every school in the district. That's where that systems accreditation piece comes in. And the last one noted there means that this district has a quality assurance process to make sure constantly and continuously that all of these system compliant items are met by every school in the district, and you have. Now, this is the work that we do. So now you have had the content itself, the standards, the assurances that are the yes, no compliant pieces. And now this is the work that the team engaged in, as every team engages in that goes through, that participates in engagement review. This protocol itself is standardized, meaning there are no changes. We go through extensive training to lead reviews. Team members go through training. Everyone knows exactly what's supposed to happen and when. And it is followed throughout the 7 institution types I talked about earlier. It is a very rigorous process. I know you know it from one side. We invite you to participate on the other side, meaning the team side. And it is complex work. It means that you have to be able to synthesize data and information very quickly because there's a set amount of time in which to do that. And people who volunteer to serve on the team do so most of the time, and they're practicing practitioners. So we always appreciate the team members who give up their time. On this particular team, we had a person from New Mexico. He's actually a Cognia colleague of Dr. Murphy. So we had that context piece, which is really important. And Cognia always ensures that there's someone locally, if you will, or regionally, who understands the regional or local context. And a little bit more about the team itself. We had 5 people, and that's a normal number for the size district in which you had. We worked over 3 days, but we worked many days prior to actually what we call on-site, and this particular time it was remote. At a high level, these are the actions and tasks that we engaged in, again, remotely. we were all through Zoom. We evaluated and reviewed individually all of the documentation, and there was a lot, and it was all very pertinent, by the way, all the documentation that the district submitted. And they submitted the evidence by standard number and oftentimes multiple types of evidence. So each team member individually reviewed all the evidence one by one. We did that before we even met as a team. The second time we met, we began to rate the standards, and a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But we wanted to make sure that we understood what the evidence said relative to each standard. So there was a discussion about that to make sure there was full understanding, not only of the evidence, but making sure that we didn't miss anything in the meanwhile. Once we were, quote, doing the review itself remotely, we began the interview process, and the system, thank you again to Carol for setting up those interviews and for the people participating in those interviews. We had outstanding participation. The interview questions were formed by the data. And so there were set types of questions that we'd ask every stakeholder group. We also made sure that there were schools, if you will, that were predetermined to interview. So we had a range of schools in the district that also had a special time to be interviewed by the team. Our job was to assess the quality of the learning environment. Typically, we would do that on site. Of course, we did not this time, but we interviewed enough people, and our questions certainly led us to evaluate the learning environment. We rated each standard 5 times. Now, you remember I mentioned that there are 31 standards. We went through each standard, 31, 5 different times. It gets a little more complex than that. I'll show you in just a second, because I want you to understand the depth, the rigor, and the complexity, so that when you hear the findings, it all makes sense to you. We use what we call an I3 rubric, and I'll show that to you in a moment. So when you see the I3 rubric, 31 standards rated 5 times collectively by the team through deliberations with all the evidence that you presented, and then that came with the final ratings. And in the end, we produced a final report. We call it the Final Engagement Review Report, and that is in the hands of the district. And as Dr. Cleveland mentioned, they are going through that report now. So let's go to the I3 rubric. I just mentioned this. So the I3 rubric was developed, and I had the great pleasure of developing this along with our CEO, Dr. Mark Elgart. And we did this because of the data that Cognia had. And believe it or not, we practice what we preach, and that is we believe in continuous improvement for ourselves. So we were looking at the data, meaning the standards rating that were coming from districts and schools around the world. And we quickly realized that we were expecting schools to give us information more about the engagement, how many people are involved, how many people attend meetings, also to what degree is a practice implemented, and less on the results. Even though we had standards about results, we were not trying to glean that from the districts. So we developed this logic model that really centers on from engagement being a level that's important. You have to gain support from your stakeholders to engage and implement a process or program, all the way through embeddedness, which is the level of the highest level, which means this practice is fully ingrained in the district's culture. What's interesting about the I3 rubric is that there can be high engagement, there can be great implementation, and those practices can be embedded in the culture. And oftentimes, and this is not unusual at all, if a practice or program is deeply ingrained in the culture, it means sometimes that you don't know why. It has been so ingrained that sometimes that the understanding of why we're doing this has been neglected. So the logic behind this is to follow this sequentially and logically, reaching to the point of having a practice embedded in the culture, and you know why it's based in the culture. You can see the very first level, we call that level 1, just like a rubric. Going down is the highest level of 4. So the scores are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Let's go. And let me just give you a few more numbers. And this is indicative of the commitment from the district and from the community. So the team remotely and the participants remotely participate in interviews over 3 days. And as a total, and you see the bottom line there, we had 196 unique individuals that participated in interviews. That is substantial given the format we had to use and everything else going on in the world this past February, and we certainly appreciate that. the interview data are used as evidence. It's not the only evidence. We triangulate the evidence. So we use that as part of understanding the district's level of performance for each standard, all 31, and on each level of that I3 rubric. And thank you for the governing authority. All of you were interviewed, and that was such a pleasure. School administrators, 27. Look at the number of students. That's difficult to get students into a room behind a computer and talking to people that they don't know. We had a nice size of parents to interview. So the way in which these interviews are conducted is simply this. It sounds simple, but it's not always. We look at the data from the first team's ratings, and the data lead us to the questions that we need to ask. So it's on two sides of the coin, if you will. One, we want to make sure that the ratings that we initially have are correct. If they're high, a 3 or 4 according to the I3 rubric. And we also want to make sure that if we've missed evidence and we're not sure why that rating is low, that we want to ask questions to affirm or confirm or find out the answers to that. So we start out with a set of interview questions that are very similar in concept and content for all stakeholders. And then we revise those questions to make sure that they fit that unique stakeholder group, but also they will change depending on the previous night's team's deliberations, because we don't want to miss anything. We want to make sure that the ratings are as accurate as possible. Again, we use a triangulation of evidence, and nowhere in the report or any time do we single out one stakeholder group and use that as the basis for the rating of the standard. It has to be triangulated. Okay. Thank you. And the findings. So this is the part that the standard ratings, the I3 rubric, the interviews, and all the evidence come together. And this is a part that requires extreme synthesizing skills on the team members. It requires a lot of deliberations. It requires making sure that the words that we choose are exactly the words that we need to choose. That saying, words matter, they really do matter, not only in the findings that we presented at the end of the review, but most importantly, what words we choose in the report. The findings, again, are based on quantitative and qualitative data. And again, a mixture of everything that we've learned in this condensed amount of time. I want to repeat again that we conducted the deliberations 5 times and rated the standards 5 times up until the morning of the findings conversation. I always believe that everyone needs to, quote, sleep on the ratings one more night to make sure that the team does not reach consensus. I do not believe in consensus. Everyone must be in total agreement that every single rating for every standard on every level of the I3 rubric is accurate and to the best that we could possibly do given the amount of evidence and time that we had to conduct the review. So again, 5 different ratings. Let's move. Thank you. Okay. So if you'll click one time, thank you. This is just a screenshot of a table that is actually in the report. And this is reflective of the resource capacity domain. And I just chose this one just because the colors are nice, but it's really what you have as far as all colors. And the blue indicate, I believe, impacting, and the green is improving. And that is a really great report. But I also want to show you that the I3 rubric, remember that chart, is reflected here. So the first level of gray, it looks like, is engagement. Then it goes all the way to embeddedness. And there's a rating next to each level of that I3 rubric. So for engagement, here you have a 4. If you look at standard 3.3, implementation is a 4. Again, 4 is the highest rating. For results, it looks like it's a 2. Sustainability, a 2. And for embeddedness, a 4. So this is an example of that model description that I gave you earlier, where you can have high engagement of a practice for 3.3. I can't read it from here, but I think I know it. And implementation strong with fidelity, and it's highly ingrained in the culture, but you're not quite sure about the trend results and why it's working. Okay, so that's an example of that. But nevertheless, the overall standard, when all those calculations are completed, ends up being impactful practice for the district. Okay. So if you'll click again, I'd like to show you the results. So this box here shows all of the results from all the 31 standards and the same different levels of the I3 rubric here. So overall, the district earned 13 impacting statements, which is tremendous, 16 improving, which is again tremendous, 2 initiating, and we'll talk about those, and 0 insufficient, which is highly unusual. Insufficient means you would have this really bold red color on that chart, and you have none of those. And to only be rated 2 as initiating, again, is quite a success story. So congratulations on that. One more, yes. Thank you. One more click. Remember I mentioned the IEQ earlier in the conversation, or I guess it's a one-sided conversation, isn't it? Anyway, the IEQ is the Index of Education Quality, IEQ, and it ranges from 100 to 400, kind of simple chart there. The average range, you can see this, is 278 point something 34 to 283. Well, look where you are. Your average, the first district accreditation journey that you've ever been on, and your average IEQ is not the average, actually IEQ is 330.81. You're going to start clapping again. All right. So out of 400, which no school that I know of, Dr. Murphy, has earned a 400, you are in the top range of the average of the IEQ, top range. Again, that is really something to celebrate. And I'm so pleased to be able to deliver that to you. The IEQ is recalculated every year, and it is decided by the commission, the overall accreditation commission for Cognia. Okay, thank you. All right, I think you'll like this visual. Probably going to get tired of me saying I3 rubric, but I'm almost done with that part of it. Again, moving across, you can see the first column, those are the levels. Then the rating, 1, 2, 3, 4. The level, I just picked out the really quick word there. So when we have few stakeholders or few indicators of practice, it's rated as a 1. When there's some indication, it's rated as a 2. When there's many, it's a 3. So the word many, M-A-N-Y, that's a good word. That means a lot of people are involved, right? Or a lot of practices are done with fidelity. Most means almost all. Then moving after rating, you see again the 5 levels of the I3 rubric. So let's look at the colors here. Let's go with the positive first because there's so much positive here. If we look at the gold chart, the gold part, many, 3. Under engagement and implementation, you can look at those numbers. 7 for many, 15 under implementation, scored a 3. If we look at most, 21 under engagement. That speaks so very highly of the commitment that the stakeholders in this district and throughout its schools have to always improving. And then for implementation, 13 rated most. That's a lot. All right, we're going to skip the blue for a second and go back to the gold. Under embeddedness, remember that's the level where practices, programs, you name it, all the standards are ingrained in the district's culture. We have 5 under many, rating number 3, but 23. That is outstanding and actually earned a finding that I'll talk about in a second. So overall, you can see visually that there is a high degree of engagement, buy-in, empowerment, implementation with fidelity. Everybody knows what to do and it's done well. And then they do it so well that it becomes part of, this is the way we operate here. This is how we do things here. Now we're going to go to the blue. Notice I put some softer colors so it wasn't so bold for you, but the blue means this. When we have results, meaning you're collecting data intentionally and you're using that data intentionally, well, we have some instances of it. We noted that. Again, we're basing this on the evidence and the process that we used. But also you have 14 of the standards that were rated many with a 3. That's good. Sustainability is defined this way on the I3 rubric, and it means that there's trend data that are captured, analyzed, and used over a 2 to 3 year time. We would like it longer than that, but we're very realistic because we know like state assessments change and other types of assessments change, just to give an example. So we go with 2 years as a trend. We would like it longer than that. What we noticed with our findings was that for the I3 rubric for sustainability, we rated 24 of the standards as some, rating of a 2. So there's a little work to do there. For many, there were 6 of those for sustainability. So what sense can we make out of this visual representation here? And it goes back to something I've already said, and it's not unusual for a district or a school or any of our institution types to have some type of visual representation like this. And that again is engagement. People buy in, they know what to do, they do it well. Sometimes we get so busy that we know we have to collect data, but we don't always analyze that data to the degree we need to inform the decisions that we need to make and know if there's value and effectiveness of the program, practice, procedure, policy, fill in the blank. And then sometimes we change our minds and we don't always collect the same type of data or comparable data where we can make some sense out of what that means over time. And then again, embeddedness means that it's practiced well and it's embedded in the culture. Let me move here. Okay. All right. This is from the report verbatim. So I'm going to start with what we call the strengths, and those are just my words for tonight. But I want this caveat to be heard loudly and clearly and publicly, of course. And that is, even in the areas that we noted could be improved, there were strong, strong indicators of strengths in those improvements. So when you read the report, in some areas you'll think, is this an area for improvement? It looks like we're doing really well. Precisely, you are. But if you keep moving through the report on particular findings, you'll see that area that you can revise and improve, and it'll take you to the next level. But again, this is an excellent district with so many strengths, it'll be hard to name them all. Let's start with the first one. And this is in order as they appear in the report. And I want to read it to you. And it says this: the district's mission permeates throughout its schools and is embraced by its stakeholders. That says a lot. Remember, we are very clear about the words that we use because stakeholders encompasses community. Not only people who work in the schools, who are employed by the district, but the community at large. And I think that's represented here tonight in the audience. So some of the areas that we want to make sure that you all hear from the findings are this: that significant strength takes of this nature for the mission to be permeated really is reflective of the strong leadership. And I start with you all as board members, and of course, Dr. Cleveland and her longevity. It also means there's strong leadership in the schools. Everybody has to live and breathe the mission, and you are. The stakeholders know, follow, and embrace the mission. That was just throughout. Again, to use the word permeate, that is the exact word. In every interview, it was known and said and believed. People believe in where the district is going and what its purpose is. We found very strong evidence manifested in its outreach to stakeholders. You've done a tremendous job of working through how to communicate with stakeholders, making sure that there's a process in place where it's coming to you and they feel free to give you information. You focus on everyone's well-being, not just students, which is the primary group that you want to focus on, but the well-being of everyone, especially the past 2.5 years. And the examples listed here on this slide are just a few of the examples of how that mission is manifested throughout the district, such as your career and technical program. There are many more, and you can read the report to find out, but we wanted to highlight this in itself. Okay, let's go to the next one. There. All right, I'm going to read it to you again. And you're going to say, what's the difference between the two? Oh, there's a big difference. The district created a positive, respectful, professional, and collegial culture. Let me say this. A district can be so immersed and follow its mission, but it might have a terrible culture in which no one wants to work or no one wants to stay in. That is not your case. You've got a strong commitment to your mission, and as a result of that, but it's not always, your culture is extremely inviting, it's positive, it's nurturing. People really enjoy being part of this district, and there's tremendous pride about being an employee and a student at this district. So congratulations with that. Our findings indicated that there's an emphasis on developing relationships with all stakeholders. And what you know about culture, and I know you know a lot about culture, but I want to repeat this, is that probably the premise of a good culture in any organization is how you treat each other and how you develop relationships. And this district has made that a priority, and it shows and it manifests in all its work. So a culture can be strong or weak, and it really is dependent upon how you nurture those relationships. And again, the interactions that you have with stakeholders, and they've been positive, trusting, and certainly many, many. So we appreciate the work that has been done to ensure the culture remains strong. It's something that you will work every day to sustain. We understand that. But again, it correlates with the mission, but not always. In your case, you do both. I want to show you just a few items here that we thought were outstanding. Again, there are so many more. But when you think about what makes a strong culture and why people want to be here, and I know recruiting is tough on everyone right now, but you are doing things that really make people want to join your team, such as the early release days. That is embedded in the culture of Rio Rancho schools. The job-alike monthly meetings, that allows school people of different types of across the district with similar jobs, assistant principals, coaches, and so on, to be together to discuss strategies, pedagogy, data, whatever is the topic, and then take that information back to their schools. And you have a very strong induction program. You take care of people as they enter into your school district. Okay, another strength. There is deep commitment to continuous improvement. Now, this is interesting. I read the Readiness Review report that was conducted, oh gosh, maybe 3 years ago. That is to make sure that the district is a candidate for accreditation and for the engagement review. And actually, it was listed as an area to improve. And I read that, I thought, my goodness, what tremendous effort and commitment the district collectively and in the individual schools have made to continuous improvement in a very short amount of time. That is awe-inspiring. So through that process, it meant that you took it seriously, not only that area for improvement in the readiness report, but all of them. But this one really rose to the top. What it also means that all the stakeholders, and we saw this through the interviews themselves, was that all the interview people that part of the process were very clear about continuous improvement, what it meant. We actually used the words, and sometimes when I lead reviews, I use the term continuous improvement and I have to define it, and sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. In your case, in the district, everybody understood what continuous improvement was about, and they were very excited to be part of that. Some of this is due to the New Mexico DASH program, and we recognize that, but nevertheless, continuous improvement is continuous improvement, which means there are objectives that are set, data are analyzed, and you're monitoring the progress frequently, and people are talking about progress and setbacks and challenges and what to do to improve. There have been a variety of methods to use to inform your stakeholders about continuous improvement, and that was also noted by the team. And the district's annual report, I believe that is created by Dr. Cleveland and her team, is a powerful message to the district and its stakeholders about what is happening in Rio Rancho schools. That is also part of continuous improvement. Surveys that are administered, that's a part of continuous improvement. The strategic plan, which I know has been on hold, waiting on this report, is also indicative of continuous improvement. So again, a very, very deep commitment to that. We're going to move next to, and I'd label this as consideration for improvement, because remember, in the report, remember that red color? You don't have any reds. If you had a red box anywhere on that report, you would be required to address it. There is absolutely nothing, and it kind of hurts me to say this, but it's true, nothing in the report that you are required to address. That's huge. Every content piece listed in the report, every rating, every recommendation, commendation that is made in the report is up to you. It is up to you to dissect, to disaggregate, to decide, does it work for us? Is this something that we want to address or not? Again, you are not required by Cognia, because you're fully accredited, all your schools in the district, to move forward. You have nothing that's insufficient, and that includes the assurances. But for improvement, to consider, the process to collect and use trend data needs to be systematic. That's not the first time you've heard me say that tonight. If you were to ask me, okay, Vicki, what is one area to improve? That's the only number you get, just one. I would center on this one. And this is so doable for you all because you're very, very close. Here's what we ask, is that you find a systematic way of collecting data. It's almost like putting it on a calendar, if you will, of using systematic process to collect data, to know which data are important to use, make it intentional. It needs to match whatever you need to measure, that there's a triangulation of data, and that you use it with fidelity, okay? So what led us to this finding for you to consider is that when we talked about trend data with our different stakeholder groups, there seemed to be uncertainty among the stakeholders about that. You have a process to collect data and use data, and it's certainly many evidence and examples of when you've used data to make decisions. We're not saying you don't. We're just saying formalize the process, make it very intentional, because it is so important, especially giving the resources that we all are concerned about around the country, as well as making sure that every learner reaches his or her potential. So again, intentional data on a schedule, a systematic process, and everybody knows what that is. Another consideration for improvement is the district's approach to curriculum and instruction is equitable. And by the way, your curriculum and instruction program is outstanding, and that includes your assessment program. But the fidelity of an implementation needs to be monitored. Here's what we found, is that your curriculum instruction program is student-centered. It is a great curriculum program. Even during the pandemic, it was implemented very well. You have a well-developed assessment system. That means you're measuring how students are progressing in a number of ways through formative, summative, and interim assessments. Very great. You have a professional learning program that focuses on pedagogy, curriculum instructional strategies. You're doing all of that really well. But what we found was that there was some inconsistency, especially during the interviews and according to the evidence, that students had fewer opportunities in some of the schools to learn social studies and science and to really take advantage of the STEM programs that you have here. So again, that monitoring piece is really associated with the fidelity of making sure that social studies and science, in the elementary grades especially, are implemented with fidelity. We also recommended that you expand or consider expanding college and career readiness to elementary. And you're probably saying, how can that happen, Vicki? That's a high school program. We're not talking about CTE as it's noted in your district and for high school. It means integrating that awareness in your elementary curriculum as well as middle school. The other finding that we wanted to highlight here for your consideration for improvement is to reintroduce. Note the word reintroduce. It's not introduce, it's bring it back. What we realized through the interviews as well as the evidence is that the problem solving, creativity skills, and collaboration have always been part of your instructional core. When the pandemic hit and we were, you all were forced as others to do different types of learning and instruction, teachers had to teach differently. That was just the norm. Now that students are back in the school, teachers are certainly doing their very best. Everybody is working to, adapt. I'll use the word adapt. We really wanted to point out that now is the time to not revert back to a teacher-directed lesson, make it still student-centered, but reintroduce those skills into your instructional program and monitor that they are being reintroduced to your school children. Again, you have done it. We noted that, but let's bring it back. The last finding for consideration for improvement is this one. Standard operating procedures are established. They're everywhere. People know what to do in this district, and they do it. But an evaluation of their effectiveness needs to occur. So that goes back to the data piece. So you can see how the standards work together. The standards are also built as a system model. One works with the other. They don't work in isolation. So this one comes to the point of there's engagement about what type of procedures need to be developed. There's full implementation. And then if you go to embeddedness, it's part of the culture. But when we look at measuring, how well do we know that this standard operating procedure or the set of them are really working? That's where we fall a little bit short and something to consider to improve. So again, going back to a process to make sure that you evaluate what might not be so evident to you, but you do it so often, just step back and think, why are we doing this? How do we know it really works? And are we getting the return on investment that we really need? We want to acknowledge, though, how the recruitment process is working. You're being very innovative in that, and we wish you well. That's a much of a challenge, we know. The budgeting process, which was also mentioned in the Readiness Review Report 2 or 3 years ago, is amazing, and we want to commend you for that. And you have a very comprehensive set of policies and procedures, and that's the work of the board. So we acknowledge that. But given all that content, we still ask that you evaluate the effectiveness in a systematic way. In closing, again, this district is a high-functioning, high-quality, very effective district. It provides a high-quality, I'm overusing that word because I don't know of another word except excellent, education for all its learners. We saw great evidence of equity also. It's indeed a district that understands its community and is reflective about community needs and takes action. You're a strong force not only in this community, but around the state. And want to also acknowledge that there are challenges that you address, and you do that in a very thoughtful way. At the helm, you have the stability of Dr. Cleveland, and I want to make sure that that comes out loudly and clearly in this presentation, because all the strengths that we noted, as well as the challenges that you face now and have faced, you've done those with excellence. You've done that with the best decision that you could possibly make along with the board. But it takes stability and leadership to make substantial change. It takes stability and leadership with Dr. Cleveland and her cabinet to achieve what you've achieved as a district. So we appreciate the leadership that you have in this district. With the leadership like Dr. Cleveland, the board, and the cabinet, it provides trust among the community. It provides that transparency and what you're going through as far as trying to recruit people to come to work here. People take note of Rio Rancho. You have so much to be proud of. It was my privilege to learn more about the district, to be part of your continuous improvement process. And again, I congratulate and thank you on behalf of Cognia for trusting us to come in and evaluate you. And you exposed yourself. This is not easy to just say, here we are. Tell us what we're doing well. Tell us how we can improve. We want to know, and we want to know so we can take action. So we thank you, and I thank you on behalf of all Cognia. Thank you. You have 2 resources here in the state. Dr. Susanna Murphy, who you met earlier. She is a longtime resident of Rio Rancho, and she, by the way, has taken me around Rio Rancho, and it is a delightful community. And Mr. Gregory Howell, who I believe lives nearby, he was also on the team. But these are your contact people for anything that you need with Cognia regarding this report, regarding continuous improvement, resources, whatever. They are your touch points, and you could not get any 2 finer people to represent Cognia. And in closing, again, thank you. And this is something that we live by also, that knowledge is opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I want to just echo Dr. Cleveland's sentiments from earlier and just thank you and your team for all the time that you spent with us. And also to all of our team too. As you said, I loved how you talked about we too as a board appreciate our leadership team. We are amazed by them all the time. They are wonderful. And I'm looking behind you because there's so many of them back behind you, but they have been wonderful throughout the last few years that I've worked with them. And we're just truly grateful for them. So are we good to go to questions or do you have more things you want to?
That's the last slide. I think one more, doesn't matter what you show. You can keep Susanna's information up there. That's fine. She drives a white SUV Jeep, by the way. So.
Okay, well, to start off, Dr. Cleveland, did you want to add anything before we go into some of our
Well, let's
questions?
just let
Or
the board start with questions.
with their
and
questions?
I have a couple of comments afterwards, but
Okay.
let's just go to questions if that's okay.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so we have some questions we kind of came up with together as we were looking through things. And just to start us off, one of our initiating was that the learning culture promotes creativity, innovation, collaboration, problem solving. And so in your experience, what does an innovative district look like? We want to be that district. I think that's what we strive for. We had it in Dr. Cleveland's slides, and we talked about it a lot even before we started. But what does an innovative district look like, and how can we do that better?
Sure. Be happy to answer the question. Let me say this, because I am representing Cognia. The question is out of the scope of the report, but I am happy to answer that question as a Cognia employee and as a lifelong educator. You are an innovative district. We don't have a standard that measures that, so therefore those words and that content does not appear in the report. But to your question, it's a good one, so thank you for asking it. You are always looking towards the future, but what typically happens is that sometimes, I'm not saying this about your district, but saying it for the greater good, that the word innovation is often mixed up with the word being creative. And innovation simply means this, that you're doing something, a change, you're making change based on the needs that you have determined are needed. You're not trying to do something so unique that it's out there that nobody's ever done it before. It's impossible. Everything is recycled, right? But innovative means that it's more about making changes to improve something for the good of whatever it might be, good of students. It could be a program or practice, something like that. So making sure that you're not trying to be so unique that you forget that you are innovative because you're making change. So from my experience, and it's the work I've been doing for 12 years, it's not necessarily what is it, it's what you do to learn to be innovative and continue to think in that space. And a process that we use in my work is that we always start with understanding the current reality. What is the current landscape? So you analyze the data of what you have, so you have a good handle or pulse on, this is where we are. You put that aside, I'll call that a bucket, if you will. And the next process that you engage in is an environmental scan. And you look at different trends in different columns of thinking, such as, what are some trends that are occurring technologically? What are some trends that are happening politically? What are some trends that are happening in society? And what are some trends economically? And you read everything outside of the education space, and you find out what those are, and you try to look at those from a 3 or maybe 5 year span of time in the future. And then you take those two buckets, if you will, and you synthesize that information, and that in itself will give you those innovative strategies or practices or programs in which you can consider to implement. So again, use information that you know about your district. Look at different types of research, information, literature about the future, and marry the two, and that will lead you to what you need to do. I would really not want to say make too many recommendations. I'll give you some suggestions and thoughts to consider, though, to get a little more narrow to your question. Personally, Vicki, I think that it's very important for today's students to be systems thinkers. So when we think about 21st century skills, which I know you've all been doing that work, they're typically centered on those 4 C's: collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, whatever, the communication. Those are great, but they're a little bit tired, right? So think more broadly than that. So when I say think about systems thinking, what that really means. It means that those 6 principles I talked about earlier, wholeness, the sum of the parts are equal to the whole. Think about students learning what systems thinking really means and how you go about that. Another idea that I think is important to consider is ensuring that students are multiliterate thinkers. And what I mean by that is they can take different formats like digital, print, whatever, and make sense of that. And they are very proficient in being literate in different types of literacy. Okay. Another innovative thought that you might want to consider is that they become really immersed in thinking about the future. What does it mean to be a future thinker themselves? And those few ideas might separate you a little bit more. You're already pretty separated from districts around the country, but to think about it in a more innovative way and to go deeper into that 21st century learning, I think those are some things I would recommend personally to you all to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a wonderful answer. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to go through the board and see. I think a lot of our questions, honestly, that we had originally looked at, we've gone through. But I'm still going to just kind of go through the board and see if they have more questions. We'll start with Jeff Morgan or any comments too, Jeff.
I'm sorry, let me turn my mic on. One of my questions was asked, where are we strong? And you spoke very highly of that with regard to Dr. Cleveland, our staff, leaders, the leadership that we have. So you pretty much answered my question there. And then my other question was, where do we need to focus our efforts? And the main focus for me was, and you talked about it with regard to the findings, was the process to collect and use trend data that needs to be systematic. So the concerns and the thoughts I had, thank you so much.
Thank you. You took really good notes, and thank you for that. I'll add one more, just clarification to that. It is about trend data, but program evaluation is part of that finding that we want to ask you to consider for improvement. And by that, it's simply this, and I will tell you up front, and I'm going to ask Dr. Murphy if she agrees, because she leads a lot of reviews too. That's standard 212 for the district. I think it's 211 for schools. Without a doubt, that's usually the lowest scoring standard, correct? To the point that when I led the development of the new standards that have just been launched will be launched July, we looked at the data and said, we have to repeat that standard about program evaluation. And then we added a standard about teachers conducting action research. So just get ready for that. But program evaluation is another. So that's going to be 10 years worth of focusing on program evaluation, because quite frankly, we just haven't seen the needle move very far. But it's so important, especially to you all who develop and approve the budget. And that is this. It's easy for schools and districts to be lured into adopting a new program, buying a new software application, you name it. And the budget list just gets longer and longer, does it not? And without program evaluation, you don't have data to stand on and say, that one is not a good return on investment. And here's how we know that. It's been implemented for 3 years. Its impact should have been this. This is what we intended it to do, but we're not seeing that. We need to evaluate it one more time before we make a decision to continue funding that particular program. So that's the beauty of a program evaluation. It not only impacts what you do, but it should also be done in every school. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, Jessica Tyler.
Thank you. And again, you've talked to most of this already, but my question was, what did you see within our standard operating procedures that led to the initiating score? And I think you've covered that. But if you could give some examples of how you can measure the effectiveness of some of the procedures. I think for some policies and procedures, it's easy to kind of grasp how that could be measured, but some of them are a little bit more abstract. So can you give maybe a few examples of how we could better measure the effectiveness of our policies and procedures?
Thank you for the question. That's actually standard 1.7. And in the column where the colors are, you've got a green there, improving. 212 was the one with the yellow with the initiating. So just want to make sure we're on the same page with that. But your question is a good one. And it's also a standard that we see oftentimes that districts fall a little bit down on their scores because of that. The way in which you want to consider standard operating procedures to evaluate their effectiveness is simply whatever the procedure is. So if it's, oh gosh, give me a SOP. Put you on the spot. Look at that. Procedure for taking attendance. That's a really bad one. Oh, that's an old one. I can't think of one. You put me on the spot. I have
You can come
stumped the
back.
board.
I'll get an example.
All right, let's just keep going. So procurement, all right. I think you have a good process for that, actually. So that's not a good example. But the way that we can measure that is focus groups, right? For the people who have to request something to purchase. People are actually doing the work. You can observe them if they're following the process with fidelity. So there are focus groups, there's observation data, surveys always work. But I would tend to lean more heavily on that particular example with focus groups with the people who actually have to use that process, your principals, teachers, people in central office. So to evaluate, is this really working? Yeah, thank you. That was a fun one, so thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We'll go over to Gary Tripp.
Thank you. I got put on the spot there. I had to give my train of thought back here. So my question may be for also Dr. Suzanne Murphy as well, but my question had to deal with, we were in a recession of 2007 that we never got out of, and a lot of principals around this district have been really trying to work magic since 2007's recession. And then we get hit after we're trying to get out of a recession and a slow recovery in this state with the pandemic. And then I totally agree with the findings that we have to re-engage in creativity, problem solving, and collaboration. And I guess my question is, what is some of the magic that's out there and best practices that we could share with our leadership that we can get back to building that back? And how are schools coming out of this recession? I don't think we talk about that enough in the last couple of years. And then all of a sudden our leaders got hit with the pandemic and they had to make another set of adjustments.
Right. Great question. Thank you. Hopefully this will help you a little bit in that schools everywhere around the world are struggling. As an aside, I have just returned from Singapore. That was an exciting trip on many levels, but it was to conduct a review for a corporation that's actually housed in Canada that manages and owns schools all throughout Asia. I say that to you because that's 12 hours, it's a 27-hour flight away from here. Very different context, very different type of institution. Their struggle is the same as what you just asked here. How do we come out of this recession? How do we make sure that we re-engage students and teachers after the pandemic? So I say that as institutions, no matter the type, are struggling everywhere. But I will say this personally, again, this is outside the scope of the report, that I'm not so sure, this is Vicki speaking, that we need to return to that sense of normalcy that we had pre-COVID, okay? Maybe we learned something really good, that's hard to say, by being remote. You all did some remarkable things. You created Cyber Academy, Online Academy. I probably had those words confused, but I know what they are. You made sure that all your students had technology and you provided internet. So you've already transferred those types of resources into your everyday teaching and learning. But to your question, I wish I had the magic bullet that I could say, this is what good schools and districts and corporations around the world are doing, but they're all struggling like you say you are. But I will say it, I think it comes down to this and start as a starting point. And that is, listen to the voices, know your stakeholders, know your students, let them have a voice, let them tell you what they need. They can tell you, but you've got to be willing, and you are, to listen to them. So find ways that you can engage stakeholders, meaning the students, in what worked for you during the pandemic that we need to consider adopting. What do you want to learn? And how do you best learn that? Those are questions off the top of my head, but you will be much better at that when you think through it. So listen to voices of students, listen to the voices of your teachers and your staff, listen to the voices of your community. triangulate that, and you're going to find strategies, programs, practices that best suit you, your district, and your context to survive this new phase of normalcy that we're all in. But I would just come down to the voices. What are they telling us? And be ready to listen and ask the hard questions and keep asking. So almost put that on a schedule of frequency and have a wide representation of people that you talk to in a very intentional way. What are they telling us and why are they telling us this? Hope that helps some.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Noreen Scott.
People who know me know I'm a competitor. So my first question is, who's gotten a higher score and what is it above 30.81?
You know what? I don't know. I don't. We don't benchmark it that way. Again, it changes every year, but you're high. 330 is outstanding. But
Is it safe to say it doesn't matter since you don't know, right?
you can say that.
Okay.
Yes, because I'm going to leave for Atlanta in the morning. Yes, you can say that.
Okay.
I'm on an 11 o'clock flight, so you can't find me after that. But no, I could not tell you that. And again, the IEQ is not benchmark. I think we're moving to a different process for the new standards and protocol after July, but the current protocol doesn't benchmark it that way. We've been listening to our stakeholders and they want exactly what you asked for. So you ask and we are responding, but not right now.
Okay. Well, the second part of that is, what are some of the greatest strengths that you observed in your report? You mentioned several of them, but which ones would you focus on to propel us forward? Because that's really our goal. We want to be the best.
And you're one of the best. You're going to give, since you're a kind of a numbers person, you're going to give me 1, 2, or 3 to respond.
Pardon?
You can say choose 1 or choose 2.
Just one. For
Just
me.
1.
Yeah. But you can list 3 if you've got it.
All right. I'm going with this one because it's what the findings say, and it's what I believe too as an educator, and it's your leadership. Unlike other districts around the country, where the typical, and the statistics show this, the typical tenure of a superintendent is about 5 years. The myth is it's 3 years. It's really about 5. I believe in New Mexico, the average tenure is about 3 to 5 years. With the last year, about 30% of the superintendents out of 89 districts leaving that position. Leadership, leadership, leadership. Whatever you all are doing, that's some magic there, Mr. Tripp. The magic that you have with the leadership, and when I say it's Dr. Cleveland, cabinet, principals, teachers, board, you all have the dynamics that are making it work and seeing success. And that is the greatest strength of this district. So it comes down to people, but people who know their work, who aren't afraid to lead, who aren't afraid to make hard decisions and do that with dignity. It's amazing.
We'll take number 2 too.
All right. I'll have to go back to culture, and they're not necessarily related, but they are. One works with the other, but you can have a strong culture, positive culture, but the leadership keeps revolving in and out, right?
Yeah.
Right. But you have both. You have a positive, strong, nurturing culture, and you have the leadership where people want to be here. They gravitate towards this district. So you've got a combination of both, and that's unusual. So there are you two. I can do more, but that's almost. Thank you. I love the question.
Thank you. So one more question for me, and then we'll go over to Dr. Cleveland. But did you find, as you went through our district with you and your team, is there anything unique about Rio Rancho Public Schools that you have not maybe usually observed in some other school districts that you've observed?
Most definitely. And it goes back to the answer I just gave Ms. Scott, and that is the leadership is stable. That's highly unusual. Number 2 would be, to me, that you've had a long-standing, well-oiled and well-implemented professional learning community structure. It is unheard of to have that structure and implement it the way it's supposed to be implemented by the do for model, as long as you have. That is a mainstay in your district. Teachers talked about it. They were excited about it. They couldn't wait to be part of it. Principals talked about it. So that in itself is something that's very unique about Rio Rancho. And that is innovative. That was innovative a long time ago. Now, many schools and districts around the world use that term, oh, we have PLCs, professional learning communities. And when you kind of disaggregate and get down into what is happening during those meetings, that's not the real meaning of professional learning community. Yours is. You are doing it well and doing it right. So definitely unique.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so with that, we'll go over to Dr. Cleveland for her comments or any questions that she may
I
have.
just have a couple of comments and again, thank you so much for
Thank you.
your presentation. Board Member Scott, there is one that's really strong in our state that I had a chance to see, and that was Los Alamos. And they did a very good job, but it was pre-pandemic. And one of the things I really want to emphasize is that it was much more difficult as you went through a pandemic to do this. We were working under very different circumstances. That being said, the staff stepped up and did what they needed to do to help us get through. And they did it considerable sacrifice and considerable additional time and effort to keep things all together. And so appreciative of the work that they did during the last 2 years. But it had an impact. And to say that it didn't have an impact would not be honest. And so it did. And I think we got to see Maslow's hierarchy just in full motion again, looking at those physiological and those safety concerns and all of that. Sometimes then those higher level things got pushed to the side. And the word was survival. And so, but we've been through that. We're not through it completely. We know that there's still going to be some residual effects, and we're going to have to deal with that. But I do think that at this point, we have to as a team, and I think this is the team that will do that. As a team, we're now going to have to say, we've gone through that. We've learned a lot of things as a result of that, but now's the time we're going to have to move forward. And I don't think any of us really want to go back to the way things were. I think what our hope is that we will learn from that and move forward and do better than we've done before. So, that looking back nostalgically is really not what we want to do. We really want to be focused on the future. And so looking at that whole thing of innovation, it's very interesting. As we did our self-assessment, not only our administrative team, but our instructional staff across the district, on their own identified many of these problems and many of these needs. For example, one of the things that we kept seeing across, we heard it from parents, we heard it from students, we heard it from staff, is a strong desire to reinstill the love of learning, the joy of education. And some of that had dissipated over the last several years. And not just with the pandemic, but with some of the other national trends that we all knew were sometimes not always working to the advantage of our students. But they identified those things and said, they really wanted learning to be more engaging. And I really want to be sure we know the difference. We talk about this. Engaging is not entertaining, but it needs to be engaging and students need to be involved. And there's just such a strong commitment we saw across the district to rethink how we engage learners. And so that's pretty exciting. I think about some things, and we talked about processes. What were processes? And one that I thought about was our hiring process. We never had so many vacancies. We never had so many challenges. We used to talk about the bench getting shorter, but all of a sudden there was no bench. And so stepping forward, and the HR department, for example, and it's true of all departments, all of a sudden started to streamline that process. All of a sudden they were there, they were getting back with people right away. They were telling people how much they wanted them to come. Stepping up with alternatives like an internship program, with the teacher residency that we've got a group working on right now, but alternative ways of filling those classrooms. And principals stepped up and took interns and helped them learn how their schools operated and how to be an effective staff member in that school. So I think that a lot of good things have come out of it. We are very much aware there's a lot of areas that we need to get better. But this is a really good team. Everything that Rio Rancho has been able to do over the years is because we have a solid group of people who really do care about the needs of our students. And then, the last, I think we do realize that program evaluation is just something we've got to get a bit better at. And it's an area where we've got some really strong people, but we have not institutionalized that across our district. And so we have some strengths in that area, but it's not everywhere. And so that idea of fidelity that you mentioned, making sure those things are in place everywhere across the district, not just in some places, but a lot of really good information. But I was pleased the staff identified most of these on their own, even before that. But what this does is it reinforces that, and it also helps us look at the things that we're good at, and we can replicate those things. And sometimes it's just wonderful to hear that you're doing some things well. And we had a conversation at a meeting several of these folks were at, and was about a student who loved a particular teacher, and that teacher is very modest and saying, well, it was a culmination of the work of many of the student's teachers. But the difference was she was the one that told him that he was strong. And so that sense of, we have the organizational piece, but we still have that personal responsibility. And I think this just helps us look at what those are, and maybe renews our commitment to just continually get better. So again, thank you so much. And that's all I have in terms of comments.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. We want one more applause for the end of our accreditation. Thank you. Okay. It feels like we've been working on that for so long. It's just, we should keep talking.
Just a little bit of a relief that went through the process. The one other thing that I wish I had asked Vicki, if she wants to respond to it, or even, Susanna wants to jump in, and I'm sorry I didn't ask it. One of the reasons one of the really good things about Cognia and the change in the process is it's not like what we used to do. And some of us go back a long time to that. It's not one and done and you're out and we'll see you in 10 years. So it shares some of the supports. I think the board would like to, what are some of the supports that the staff will have? For example, Susanna's been working on a leadership circle effort in the state. But one of the other reasons we really wanted to be involved was we wanted support for people who were on this quality journey. So if you could just even give one example or anything else, but that's one of the things that Dr. Murphy and Mr. Heil do, is they support us, not just at the time we have our accreditation visit, but ongoing. So,
And that's part of the journey. That's why we call it the journey. It's not an event. So we actually study those reports from our perspectives as well. And we're constantly contacting the district, which we will be doing, to say, checking in. How's it going? What help do you need? Because we are part of your team. Without that support, we cannot expect a district or any school that we work with to just do it on their own. That's a commitment that we have. We're part of your journey. And it's important to keep that in mind, because folks really in the past used to look at accreditation like, oh my gosh, thank goodness they're gone. Now we can go back. Yeah. Oh, and this is funny because I was at Lowe's and ran into Carol, and she said, I'm so glad the accreditation is over. And I looked at her and I said, Carol, you've only just begun. And she went, what? Everybody's in the checkout going, what are they talking about? And I said, Rio Rancho accreditation. I just said it in front of all these people. And a couple people said, what's that? And I said, you contact Dr. Cleveland and find out about that. Okay. But see, that's the joy of me living in this community. But Carol was priceless. And I said, no, and it's the journey, Carol. And thank goodness you're part of it because of your commitment and passion. So other things we support with, it's part of this understanding your report and helping you to take next steps. We're elbow to elbow with you. Why? Because learners matter and every single one of them matters. And that's our passion. It's about these kids. But in the systems approach, we have to think of how do we help leaders in their world? Leading is a lonely
lonely place. We have now, and Dr. Cleveland mentioned it, the Leadership Circle, which just has been launched. It's a national networking opportunity for superintendents and their executive team members, their cabinets, to be able to connect with leaders around the country, and eventually it will expand to around the world, to talk about the very things that everybody's been going through with the pandemic, solution circles. Let's think together from across perspectives. What's working here and how could that unfold here? So it's building this national network where folks can connect with each other and talk from think tank mentality, listening to top leaders around the world that are in the midst of trying to help the future of schooling move forward. And then there's also what we call My Voice. And Dr. Denmark mentioned that we want to hear the voices of students, but we also need to be mindful to hear the voices of our teachers in how they are part of the solution of building a healthy culture of continuous improvement through collaboration. And it helps to build their leadership skills. Right now, we have a Kellogg Foundation grant that's involving Farmington Municipal Schools. All of their teachers are involved and all of their schools. Cuba Independent Schools, the same thing. And we've connected with some schools with the Navajo Nation that are out in Arizona, because Cognia has an office with the Navajo Nation that operates out of Dene Education, and all of their schools are accredited through our work. We have set up this 2-year grant for these schools and these teachers to come together and share what they're learning about 10 drivers that build a culture that is incredible, but they're part of it. And we have found, and why this grant has come to be, especially here in New Mexico, talk about innovation, we're concerned about the retention of teachers. All of us are. And here in New Mexico, we're very concerned about diverse educators and growing that pool. And Kellogg is very concerned about equity, systems improvement, sustainability, and making sure that we retain and grow diverse educators in our state. This particular initiative is combining all of that, and we're reaching out to teachers and principals to build this collaborative way of making sure that teachers just aren't staying in schools because we're getting paid. They're part of the solution. They are part of that world. That is something they're buying into. And by golly, it's their school, and they have that incredible voice to make a difference. And eventually that grows your future leaders because they're part of a leadership system. So those are 2 things that we're working on, and we're constantly learning from that ourselves because we model continuous learning and continuous improvement. We have to if we expect that of those we serve. And we're learning along the way. So it's not just supporting this district, but learning along the way with you. And when we learn something, we share that and say, did you think about this? Are you ready to maybe do this? And I'm blessed because I do live here in this wonderful community. I have seen work all over this nation. I have the opportunity to work with folks like Dr. Denmark, and I'm constantly learning from her. And of course, Dr. Elgart, our CEO president. But, I moved to Rio Rancho years ago. I became deputy state superintendent after I finished my PhD at New Mexico State. And at the time, we had the state superintendents and state board structure. I finished my PED. Michael Davis was state superintendent. He called me and he said, "Are you finished yet?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, just finished. You need to come to Santa Fe." Well, our decision as a family was to live here because of the school district. And my child went to Enchanted Hills and all the way through the system and graduated from Rio Rancho High School. And I couldn't be prouder of being a parent and all the support I received as I was commuting to Santa Fe. This has been our community, and we continue to stay here and live here and contribute to it. And part of my way to contribute is to help this district any way that I can to continue to do great things for all of the learners you serve. So thank you for that opportunity to be a part of something so great.
Thank you.
We thank you
Yes, please.
very much.
A couple of the resources that are accessible to the schools, and that is, I'm going to mention these, the student engagement surveys. So if you want your students to give you feedback, their voices about their level of engagement, there's a survey that's accessible for elementary, middle, and high school students. And it measures engagement on 5 different levels, going from rebellion, which is the lowest, to invested, which is the highest. The Elliott, which is a student observation tool, is also available for you to use. And that is a way of observing what it's like to be a student in the classroom. That tool was developed originally in 2012, and it's still going strong. We have millions of users around the world. But it's a way of looking at learning through the eyes of students. It's not for teachers, it's about students. And the third resource I want to mention is a newly developed teacher observation tool. And the entire state of Alabama is using it as its formative evaluation, not evaluative, it's formative. In other words, you use it like a formative assessment, but it is correlated to all the items on the Elliott, but it gives teachers immediate feedback, not for evaluation, for improvement. And then you have a plethora of other surveys at your disposal. There's also an eProve, what we call eProve strategies, and that is a strategic planning module. There's also a downloadable book that's available for you to use. It takes you through 4 phases, from exploring the future all the way to evaluating the end result. So all those are available for you. A lot of support that Cognia provides. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you both to Dr. Denmark for all that she's done. And Dr. Murphy, we're really happy to have you here in our community. So thank you so much for your kind words. Dr. Cleveland, is there anything else before we go to advanced planning? Everyone good? Okay.
Don't we have some awards to give away?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have, are we giving out the things that are on the?
No, we're now, Carl, do you want to, Ms. Buckleman, you want to come forward and we have the certificates to present to the principals.
We don't want to forget the certificates to go on each school, and so it's time to actually hand those out. So I think President Galbraith, if you'd like to join me up here, Dr. Cleveland, we
Amanda's
will.
gonna do the-
Oh, okay,
And
great.
the rest of you want to go down and shake their hands if you would like, or however you want to do it. If you don't want to go down and shake hands, if you could do that.
And I think we'll begin with elementary. Is that right first? Great.
We also never have an opportunity ever, ever, ever to get all of our principals together and get a picture. And so we really would like a picture of all of you. And also if there are assistant principals here, after the certificates are given, we would love to have you in the picture as well, all of you. So when we're done with this, we're just going to go right out here in the foyer, and we'll take a quick picture. Won't keep you long, but we would just love to have a picture of all of you. So that's the plan.
Okay, thank you. Shining Stars, preschool. Kim Johns. Silazul Elementary. Colinas del Norte Elementary. Enchanted Hills Elementary School. Ernest Stapleton Elementary School. Joe Harris Elementary. Maggie Cordova Elementary. Martin Luther King Junior Elementary. West Del Sol Elementary School. Rio Rancho Elementary. Sandia Vista Elementary. Spark Academy. Vista Grande Elementary. Eagle Ridge Middle School. Lincoln Middle School. Mountain View Middle School. Rio Rancho Middle High School. What's up? Yeah, middle high school? How about Rio Rancho Middle School? It actually says that. We'll get you a new one. Okay, sorry about that. I think the mid-high was just resurrected. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. A little humor is always good for one of these events. I did read what it said, by the way. Rio Rancho Cyber Academy. That builds culture, doesn't it? Okay. Independence High School. Rio Rancho High School. V. Sue Cleveland High School. That won't work.
Maybe to Dr. Cleveland. Congratulations.
Congratulations, all the schools. Thank you, principals. Thank you for all the time you put in and work you put in the middle of a pandemic. It was a tremendous effort, and we thank you for that. It's my honor, actually, to have Dr. Cleveland maybe come up and hand this to this is our district accreditation. And by the way, aren't they really very nice certificates? Maybe hand this to the president.
This is for the whole district, and this belongs to all of you. And so thank you so much for all that you do to make this district strong. We can always be better, but boy, we have done a lot. And I thought about, as we called all the schools up, you know, we started with 7, and we are now 21. And it has been a wonderful time of growth over these years, and we have so much to be proud of, but we're just committed to always being better than we are, better tomorrow than we are today. So thank you all of you. This belongs to all of you. And also, the board, you want to say something?
I'll go back up. I'm so grateful for everyone who's here tonight. It's so fun to see all of our principals who are out, and we have Representative Hernandez here tonight, here with us, and just so many wonderful people from the district. And, you know, we have, I think, the highest score and the best schools. So thank you all so much. I'm going to go back up there and close the meeting.
I just want to say quickly that tonight's the first night we've had to have this red divider up. I think they thought that there was going to be so much enthusiasm from the principals that you guys were going to like rush the stage. I'm not quite sure why there's that like divider, but I don't know. That's what I was thinking when I was up there. I'm like making you guys very carefully come in an orderly fashion to get your certificate. So congratulations.
I thought it was a COVID regulation back again, you know?
Well, I'm glad I didn't have to take pictures with every one of you like I did with the graduates at high school. That was wonderful. So thank you all for coming. Really quick, we're just going to go through our advanced planning. So we have on June 7th, which is tomorrow, we have a staff and Hall of Honor recognition dinner at 5:30 at Enchanted Falls Event Center. On June 13th, we have an executive session at 4:30 in the conference room. Also on June 13th, we'll have a regular board meeting. The 22nd, so what Kim was just telling me, what are we missing? Is it the 20?
The 20th, there's been an executive session added on the 20th, and that was added after this agenda came out. So
the 20th, there'll be an executive session as well. And then on June 22nd, we have an audit committee meeting that will be at 3:00. The 27th, we'll have a board work session at 4:00. Also on the 27th will be a regular board meeting, and we'll just go up to that point. So we want to thank once again everyone for coming out tonight. And with that, our meeting's adjourned for tonight.
And don't forget, go out and get your picture.
Yeah, yes, we need to get everyone.
Good meeting on the 20th.
Is that?
say what? Yeah, it is. 4, yes.